envious because when he offered his offering to God, God did not accept that offering. Does God accept all worship? That's our next question. Does God accept all worship? No, he does not. God did not accept Cain's worship, did he? Why not?
He didn't do it according to his will.
Okay, Cain did not follow the instructions that God clearly gave. And if you do not clearly follow God's instructions, then God's not going to accept whatever it is that you're trying to give him. Because where does the authority lie? Does the authority lie in us, or does it lie in God? The authority lies in God. And so when he gives instruction, that's what we must do. I mean, it's not a take it or leave it type of scenario here. This is a situation where we must do those things. And especially when it comes to worship, in everything, but especially worship. He's going to tell us what he wants, and then we must obey those things. Okay, now let me get over here. Excuse me. So God then placed a curse on Cain after Cain said in verse 9, "And my brother's keeper." Obviously, he was, and yet as the oldest brother, he did not do that. Instead, he hated his brother and took his life. In verse 11, God said, "Now you are cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth." And then Cain cried about it in verse 13, "Oh, my punishment is greater than I can bear." And did God have the ability to say that your life is now forfeit? You murdered your brother Abel. Could God have taken Cain's life as a result? He could have. Instead, he allowed him to continue to live, but there are still consequences, are there not? Just because he didn't go, the full way with Cain in his, what he actually deserved, and if you do not receive what you deserve, but you receive something less than that, as far as punishment is concerned, we call that mercy. That's exactly right. So God displayed mercy to Cain when he didn't really have to or need to, did he? But yet he displayed it anyway. And so then he said, Cain cried about that. "Oh, if I can't be a tiller of the ground anymore, then that's more than I can bear. I'm going to be a fugitive." And so, verse 15, because he was a fugitive, he was afraid someone was going to kill him. So God still took care of him. He still showed mercy. "Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him." So Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod to the east of Eden. Now, who was going to find Cain and kill him? Who might that have been?
Anyone?
Siblings.
Okay, siblings. Perhaps even at this time, there possibly even were more than siblings, but nieces and nephews. Okay, so those are the individuals that is possible that could find him. So then that goes right on into verse 17. "And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch." he builded a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. And so Cain then had a wife. Where did Cain get his wife?
Must be family.
You know, when you start off with two, that being Adam and Eve, and they have however many children, where are those children going to get their spouses from? Their brothers and sisters. I mean, that's the logical, this is where they come from. Now, do we marry siblings today? Why not?
Destroy the gene pool.
Okay, so there's, of course, what we call the RH factor, right? And so when you, because of how that all genetics all works, if you, and this has been true for many, many, many years, we can think of prominent houses of old in the old country where, you know, they intermarried to keep the crown, you know, so they didn't have to worry about rivals. Well, that's a terrible situation, wasn't it? Because, you know, you can only go so far with that. And then that line's going to end genetically. I mean, that you can only go so far. So you have to marry those who are distant from you, who are not related to you, at least not very close relations, because of genetics. At the beginning of time, however, that was not the case. It was a totally different situation. So the RH factor did not exist at that time. Matter of fact, you don't have to go too far in the scriptures. You get just a few more chapters and you get to Abraham. Who did Abraham marry?
His half-sister.
He married his half-sister. Sarah was his half-sister. So, you know, they are still, that's still part of the culture, is to marry a relatively close relative. And yet you get on into Moses and the law of Moses, could you now marry your sister? No. See, so things had started to change in between Abraham and Moses, where now, no, you cannot marry someone who is your very close relative, especially your sibling. So it should not, you know, be scandalous of any kind that Cain married his, let's say it was his sister. You know, it could have been even a niece, couldn't it? It's a possibility. You know, we don't know how all those things transpired, but it could have been. But that, you know, that should not be very scandalous at all. How many children did Eve have? Oh, right, we have no idea. But she probably only had 5 or 6 children. What do you think? No. The answer is no. Adam called her the mother of all living. You don't get that title by just having a few children. Even today, there are some women, unbelievable, but you know, it happens, that can have even up to, 20 or more children? Right? Even today. If that was true, if that is true today, women have 20. Any of you ladies up for 20? No?
My
Okay.
grandmother had 12.
Your grandmother had 12? Let's
My
see.
grandmother-
I mean, none of my family members have had any more than 8, but anyway, what?
My grandmother's family, 16 kids.
16, Wayne? 16. Your grandmother had 16? Yeah. Anybody more than, in the 20s? Anybody have a relative grandmother, mother? You're a family of, now Kim, you have how many siblings? There are 12 of you? Yeah, 11 siblings, 12 of you. So, you know, big families, I mean, they still exist, right? They're still out there. Eve, listen, there's no telling how many children she had. How long did she live? How long did Adam live? Anybody know? Right off the top of your head, you should know this.
earth.
Nope. You don't know how long Adam lived? Come on, y'all are Christians? I'm teasing. 930 years. Adam lived 930 years. So now the oldest man was Methuselah, and he lived 969. We know that, 969, We kind of emphasize the oldest man in the Bible, Methuselah, 969 years. Now, he actually, of course, Methuselah was a contemporary of Noah. And even though he was, several times his grandfather in Noah's line, basically. 969. Anyway, all those men and women lived a really long time. And guess what? They didn't have just 30 or 40 years worth of childbearing age. They had hundreds of years of childbearing age. And gestation is still 9 months, folks. That didn't change. It has not changed. Whatever that was, Eve, we still continuing that today, okay? So, if you have, let's narrow it down to 400 years. No, let's say 500. 500 years of childbearing years. That's a lot of kids. That's a lot of kids. And further than that is that childbearing still was a lot easier then than it is today as well. So they didn't have near the situation and trouble that women have today too. So again, Eve could have had 100 children, maybe even more. I mean, they were populating the earth. And let me tell you, they did a good job. So Cain has all these siblings and nieces and nephews that are out there. And they know what he did. This was not a secret. You think, oh, I sinned, but it's a secret. Nobody saw me. Well, it doesn't take very long before that gets out. So Joshua told the people, he said, be sure that your sin will find you out. Okay? So we have to know that. Yes, sir.
I was going to make a comment that Eve began having painful birth when they were thrown out of the Garden of Eden.
She did. However, you are correct. It was not like pain-free. But the situation with birth in that time, in the very beginning, is still very different than it is today. Not near the struggle. Struggle, yeah, absolutely. But not near the struggle that we have today. And it's primarily because at the beginning, that the genetics, pristine, everything works really well. That's, see, every situation, environmentally, genetically, everything was just as it ought to be. So Adam and Eve were set up to be able to be fruitful and multiply. So they could, I guess sometimes we think, oh, that woman could get pregnant at the drop of a hat, some of these ladies that have all these children. Well, I think Eve definitely would fall into that category, all right? And so all Adam had to do was knock on the door and she was pregnant, and that was it. So, but that's how you would expect it to be at the very beginning, right? That's how you would expect that situation to occur. Yes, sir.
As time went on and women were having trouble giving birth, there are many verses in the Bible that indicate that since when the child is born, they rejoice because a new life has come.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, yes. And of course, we should be rejoicing even today, but back then they definitely rejoiced at a new one on the way, and of course course, being born. As a matter of fact, archaeology shows that the pregnant woman was very revered, and many images of pregnant women cut out of stone and wood and things of that nature. So they put a lot of emphasis on reproduction, a lot of emphasis on that back in the ancient days, obviously. Okay, so Cain, where he got his wife from as a close relative, she had a son Enoch, and Enoch, then Cain built a city, and he called the city after his son. And then we have Methuselah, that's not Methuselah, that's Methusael. And then he begot Lamech. And then Lamech in verse 19 did something that as of yet had not occurred. Lamech did something. He took not one, but two wives. Now it took several generations, but it didn't take that many generations for man to decide that God's way was about marriage was not his way. And so God's way with marriage was what? One man, one woman, and they were to be married for life. Lamech, instead, he thought, oh, this is such a great situation, I think I'll have two. And so that's what he did, Adah and Zillah. And they, of course, they had children, both of them, Adah and Zillah did. Jabal, he was a father such as dwell in tents and have cattle. And so all of Jabal and his family after him, he went out into the fields and he reared cattle, as essentially very close to what Abel did. Of course, he was dealing with sheep, but still, still he dealt with cattle. And then Jubal, and it's interesting, verse 21, that Jubal was a father such that handled the harp and the organ, a harp and the organ. So here we have what? What's a harp?
Musical instruments.
Yeah, musical instruments. So now we have talents that are not just, substance. What's the word I'm trying to look for here? Yeah, exactly. They're not just surviving. We're not just, when we were growing up and we went to history class, we learned about the hunter-gatherers, right? And they were just living to survive, and it was the caveman kind of mentality or whatever.
No hobbies.
Say again?
No hobbies.
No, yeah, right. No hobbies, no outside, whatever. Now, certainly there were and there have been occasions where you have, especially closer to the poles, in the harsh weather. I mean, it's still the same that way today. You're just struggling to survive. But that, through the course of human history, that is not, even Adam and Eve, God did not just create Adam and Eve and they barely could scratch out a living. That's not the world that God gave to them. That's not the mind that he gave to them. So we have to then come to this realization that what we're taught about the hunter-gatherer situation in history, folks, that's false. That's not true. Not for the majority of humanity. Now, some people, and very isolated, is that the case? Certainly it is. But, anyway, human beings have created culture. And in all cultures, guess what you have? Art. Every single culture, you've got art. They're doing something besides killing animals for food or gardening or whatever for food or whatever you got. There's more to human beings than existing. We are not animals. And so we have culture. And part of that culture, a big part of that culture, how we display that, is through art, creativity. We have the ability to create things. Animals do not have that ability. Okay? There's no tiger coloring book. You know, they don't roam around and, the bears don't go into hibernation and start, well, I can't do anything else. I guess I'll compose a symphony. That's not what they do, is it? No. Do human beings do that, though? Absolutely. It's because they have a soul that they're able to do that. So very early on, it should not be a surprise that we have music, instruments, then that are named as a talent that these individuals have. And tones, I mean, it takes, what does it take to produce an instrument that then will produce a tone? Do you just accidentally come up on that, by the way? No, folks, that's not how instruments work. You have to know. And by the way, if you've ever made an instrument, I have, by the way, that's a lot of trial and error. Even when you know what you're doing, it's still a lot of trial and error. Okay? So these are individuals who have some knowledge of where to start and then how to put that into practice. And so they had music and instrumental music very, very early on, and that's just unbelievable to me. Verse 22. Tubal-Cain, he dug into the dirt and he learned how to smelt metal, and he was an artificer of brass and iron. Interesting. Who told him that ore was in the dirt? Who told him that? He fell down a hole one day and he scratched his elbow on a piece of rock. Said, "Oh, look at this. What is this?" And he found out, is that how that worked? No. Who told him that was there? Ultimately. No?
Cain or Abel?
Yeah, and who told them?
Adam.
Adam. And who told him?
God.
God. You see, Adam already knew those things from the very beginning. We didn't discover those things. He already knew that because it was necessary to know that to live. Again, I stand by my statement. Fire was never invented. It was not discovered. Man always knew about fire, knew how to create fire. That was not a trial and error thing. Adam knew from the very beginning, the moment he was created, this is how I create fire. Because we can't live without it, folks. We can't live without it. Where else in the universe is fire? Where else? That's right, nowhere. Nowhere. Why not? That's right. You don't have the right combination of gases to have fire, except right here. Isn't that something else? That's something else. Okay. All right. Where are we? A sister, another relative. Noah in Genesis chapter 5, verse 4. Of course, he didn't just have 3 sons. He had other children that are unnamed. Of course, a lot of people existed. What were we seeing? We were seeing something. Dumb. Jennifer and I were watching a show of some sort. Anyway, and the premise of the show was that after 3,000, 2,500, 3,000 years, it was around 3,000 years, I don't remember the exact number, that there were only a few people on the planet. Something happened, and basically everybody, most everybody died, and the earth restarted by just essentially Shem, Ham, and Japheth, basically, and their wives. And then after 3,000 years, there were only a few people on the planet. Well, they don't know how to math very well, do they? After 3,000 years, how many people do you think that there would be on planet Earth?
At least 100 generations.
That's 100 generations, yes. Okay, well, let's look at something biblical. In 215 years, let me ask you this. How many people went into Egypt in Jacob's family? How many people from Jacob's family went into Egypt when Joseph was there? At the end, so in other words, at the end of Genesis, Genesis 50, how many people were in Egypt who were Hebrews?
Over 1 million.
70, 75, okay? 70 came, there were 5 already there, 75. So yeah, 75 people. And then a few of those people died, like Jacob and the 4 mothers, you know, they died, well, Rachel had already died actually. But you have 75 people, and really those who were not reproducing anymore. You can actually reduce that number down probably another 10 to about 65 people. And when they left Egypt, 215 years later, how many approximately left Egypt to go into to Canaan?
Now it's over 1 million.
Well over 1 million. There are estimates that it's a possibility that it could be closer to 3 million people, because there were over 600,000 fighting men between the ages of 20 and 60. To have 600,000 fighting men in a 40-year age range, you're going to have a lot of people, like a lot of people. And so that's just 215 years in what we would think of as more of a normal reproductive type, you know, not having 100 children per lady. Having a good many, though. We're still talking about 25 or 30 or so. But anyway, it didn't take very long. That's the whole point. It did not take very long to get 1 million people. It does not take that long. So after 3,000 years, you're looking at well over 1 billion people. Now, we just said that Eve had a lot of children. All of her daughters, Eve's daughters, what do you think? They have 2 or 3 children? A lot of children. Folks, there are estimates that when the Noahic flood came in, there were well over 1 billion people on the planet. Did you know that? And that might be a low number. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. Were you? They had a lot of children. But a lot also was going on, because the earth was also filled with violence. And when you have violence, you have murder. And so a lot of people's lives were taken. So, you know, but still, even then, even in a high murder rate here on the earth, that really doesn't touch the reproductive rate, though, does it? No, it really doesn't. All right. Then we end with verse 25. Adam knew his wife again. She bare a son. She called his name Seth. For God, she said, hath appointed me another instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And to Seth to him also were born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. And so Seth was one who did as his brother Abel and did what God said. Think about that, though. Here is Genesis chapter 4. At the end of Genesis chapter 4, and he called his name Enos, then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. That did not take very long for human beings to leave the way of the Lord, did it? I mean, what were Adam and Eve doing? Was it not their job to instruct their children in the ways of the Lord? Did not Adam receive the very words of God that he was to give to his children? And yet they either did not do an adequate job, or the children did not do a very good job of listening. Now some did, but many did not. And certainly Cain, as an adult, did not act the way he should have. Lamech, as an adult, did not act the way that he should have. And so you have this situation, even from the very beginning, where you see that children are not acting the way they should and following after God. And then you get a good one. And we were blessed with Seth. All right, Lauren?
I think I figured that. So you were saying when it said, then men began to call on the name of the Lord, so they weren't before then?
There were...
But I thought you were saying that statement meant they were drifted from that statement forward, but that was them coming back.
Right, that's them coming back.
Got it, that's where I was.
Right, yeah, they were coming back. So, Cain, Cain's brothers and family really were following after what Cain had done. And, well, he got away with it, and God didn't, punish him to the nth degree. So many decided to do things that they ought not to do. But then you have this young man, Seth, he's going to do what's right. And so that was his personal choice, to do that which was right. And that's how it always is. That, these Adam and Eve have a lot of children, and all these children have the ability to choose, just like Adam and Eve did. Am I going to do what God said to do, or am I going to do what I want to do? And Cain, he did what he wanted to do. But Seth decided that he wanted to do what God told him to do. And we certainly rejoice in that. Yes, ma'am?
I think I know my answer to my question.
Okay.
I said, for God, it says in here, for God had appointed another seed for me. It's me, Adam.
Where is that, by the way?
It's in verse 25. It says, blessed had Adam.
That would be, I believe that would be Eve.
The pronoun she is in that.
For God, now the said she is italicized, so in other words, that is not in the original. However, it is still, the reason why it is a she is because it was feminine. That's why it says she and not he, because it wasn't masculine. And obviously God is not feminine, God is masculine. But the me there would refer to Eve, because remember, Eve, when Cain was conceived, or when Cain was born, oh, God has given me a man. And then, of course, he goes and does what he did. Well, now Seth is born, and so she's saying, well, he has appointed to me another besides Abel to do his will, to do God's will. So I would say it would be Eve there. I would say it would be Eve. Mm-hmm. That's a good question, though. That's a very good question. All right. Any other thoughts, questions, ideas? Yes, ma'am?
This is considered the patriarchal age.
It is. Yep.
So he still holds up to the head of the
He's still only talking to the head of the household. That is correct. Yes. And then, so he would talk to Adam for a number of generations. And then when it was time for the next patriarch to take Adam's place, then he would talk to him.
So you can speak to Cain.
And, well, he did, but that was a special, that was not a patriarchal situation. God was not giving Cain the law. He was giving him a punishment. Much like he spoke to Eve, right? In Genesis chapter 3. So it was the same type of situation. But he only gave his commandments to Adam. And then Adam was to give everybody the commandments of God. And then when Adam died or was no longer able to communicate God's word to everybody, then God would appoint the next head of household and then talk through him, through the patriarchal age there. So that patriarchal age, Lauren, began with Adam and went all the way up to when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the tablets of stone and established the law of Moses. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were the patriarchs. Joseph, then, he was a patriarch. And all the time that the children of Israel were slaves in Egypt, they still were under the patriarchal law. So Moses, for half of his life, actually 2/3 of his life, was under the patriarchal law. And so Moses, only for the last 40 years of his life, was under the Mosaical law. And obviously that would also be true for Aaron, and all the rest of those folks as well that were alive when they left Egypt. Okay. All right. Just some interesting firsts in chapter 4. The first recorded case of bigamy. Of course, we talked about Lamech, the musical instruments that we talked about, and then the first use of brass and iron. All right, next week, lesson 4, motoring right through, dealing with, of course, the Noahic flood. Why did they give you why did he give us 1 week to do the flood? There's way more material in there we could cover in 1 week, that's all right. Lesson 4 next week. Do appreciate your kind attention this morning, your wonderful participation. We'll take a break, and at the top of the hour, come back and worship our God together.
Your 5 minutes are up.
Huh?
Your 5 minutes are up.
My 5 minutes are up.